So, I'm going to be going to an academic conference later this semester with one of my college classes. It's going to have some of my friends, some of my classmates. I hesitate to call them colleagues. It's not really part of a major degree or anything. But this is going to be a really interesting part of my life because I'm kind of spearheading this project, and I chose the topic of rethinking education. And we're going to have an hour-long panel on this topic, rethinking education. And the reason I chose this topic is because it's very important to me. My whole life so far is pretty much revolved around education. And I've had a really interesting experience with it, I think. I've had a unique experience with it. When I was very little, I was enrolled in a gifted program. And to be honest, there were a lot of things wrong with it. And one of the things that's wrong with it is when I say gifted program, I feel like I'm bragging. And I shouldn't feel like that. I shouldn't have been put in a program where it makes people feel like I'm bragging. I don't like to use that term, and I don't like that whole situation. That's one of the things I actually complain about in the project. But regardless, I was in this gifted program, and I still am involved in a dual enrollment program. I'm in 2 schools at once right now, and one of them is a high school and the other one is a college. And that's very interesting. And it's shown to me a lot of things that I think many people don't see the same way I see, because they don't get to see 2 things at once. They get to see high school and then they get to see college, one or the other at all times. And you kind of get this. You leave high school and you go to college, and then you're like, holy smokes, everything I just did was totally worthless. For the last 4 years, no one cares I did any of that, except the admissions office, really. So, between these 2 things and my just really radical interest in the topic because of how it's affected me and how it's frustrated me so much in the past, I chose that we should talk about rethinking education. And the concept of this entire panel is that if the flow of knowledge is a river in our metaphor, the river is moving at a certain pace, and there's students floating in this river. Some of them would like to go faster than the pace, some of them would like to go slower. Like if you had a line of best fit, for example, which goes like this, because there's dots, which are all of these students, thrown up on this chart in this scatter plot, here and 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 here, and you try to make this line of best fit. Unfortunately, this line of best fit isn't actually hitting most of these points. The speed of the river is not actually hitting the speed that people want it to be hitting. Right? Most people are actually going to be somewhere up here above the line of best fit, or somewhere down here below the line of best fit, below the current of the river. And that's a huge problem, because no matter what you do inside of your bureaucracy, you can never make this line of best fit hit all of the points. It will never happen. You can make it fit more points, maybe. There might be a better change you could make. You might need to review where this goes, because the points change. You get new students with different backgrounds, and you say, oh, well, actually, we need to move this up here. But you're never, no matter what you do, going to get this line to hit everyone, and that's a problem. So the solution is not to go through the bureaucracy then, because they can't fix this line of best fit. It's impossible. It's impossible. It'll never happen. And of course, it would be quite difficult to get them to change many of their larger policies. It's quite difficult to go onto the national level and say, oh, well, sorry, Bureau of Education, we actually need to say this thing. We need to do this thing. This is the technique we should use. They don't respond very easily at that level. You need a lot of momentum. So our solution instead is to not just look at the big changes that we could make to the whole system, but to look at the smaller changes we could make to the system itself and to the outside of the system, so that we can give students tools to travel at their own pace. So that in this river that has a certain speed, they can either speed up, they can paddle themselves faster, or they can slow down and paddle against the current and take a little bit of time to, or perhaps that's not a better metaphor, perhaps a better metaphor, they can paddle themselves into a slower current part of the river that is more their speed. And so that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to determine how can we break up this line of best fit so that even though what's prescribed by our educational system is going to stay not perfect, we can let students branch off of that and hit their optimum speeds, whether they're slower, whether they're slower or faster. That is our whole goal. And I think this is something that education really needs to look at, because as time goes on, student populations change, technology changes, teaching methods change, and it's really hard to get the entire bureaucracy all at once to make changes to fit that. Now, that can be considered a problem of the bureaucracy in the first place. You can say, well, we shouldn't have a bureaucracy then, if that's the case. And I think you're right, actually. I definitely agree. But I don't have the power to change that. Maybe I will at some point when fairy dust is invented and pigs fly. But until then, I can't do that. So my solution, our solution, instead, is to look at how we can agoristically look outside of this small system, this closed system, and how can we do things out here? How can we make changes in the rest of the world that will solve the problems that our education system does not solve? And I think the main problem is not creating content. I don't think the main problem is that we don't have enough external content. If you want to learn something on the internet, you can learn something on the internet. There are things you can't learn on the internet. You can't learn biomedical science. You can't learn how to do surgery on a human being, for example, or really anything. You can't probably learn how to weld. You probably can't learn skydiving on the internet. You might find resources that might help you in your path doing those things, but you can't learn them entirely on the internet. However, there are many topics like that. Most topics you can learn on the internet. If I want to go learn guitar, and I actually started learning guitar, you can do it on the internet. If you want to go learn any subject, you can learn it on the internet, because we have content available for almost all of those things. Some of it's behind paywalls, but most of those are pretty affordable compared to the radical costs of public education. So the problem is not the content. The problem is that people don't know about the content. The problem is that classrooms are so far behind in technology that they're not explaining to students how to utilize these things and learn at home extra things on top of what they're learning at school. And some of this is just the generational gap, because of course your teachers are older, they're not familiar with the newest, greatest thing. If your teacher is 50, they probably they're probably not as familiar with the concept of an iPad as you are. They're probably not as familiar with the concept of, oh, well, I have Google Drive, or I have OneDrive, and I can just grab whatever I want off the internet at all times. They're probably not as familiar with the concept of a paperless work environment. They're probably not, they probably didn't grow up with a laptop. They probably didn't have all of these things. And what we need to do is get these things in the hands of teachers so they can get them in the hands of students. Because most 10-year-olds don't have the research skills to go find these materials on their own. Most 10-year-olds don't know how to answer their own questions on the internet. You need someone to help facilitate that. When you get to my age, you can. You start to figure that out. You figure out, wow, this is a completely limitless environment, and I can learn anything I want here. But it's not as apparent when you're young, and you need someone to help facilitate that entry into the knowledge base. And where else are we going to find a captive audience but in the classroom? So one of our main goals is going to be this concept of we have to get these tools, these paddles, into the hands of students. But to do that, we have to get them into the hands of teachers. And we have to teach teachers, and we have to not just teach them methods, but we have to impress upon them that teaching is really about vision. It's really about your imagination and your ability to find new materials. Not just to teach out of a textbook and just read segments out of that, but to really go and look for new knowledge and to get that to your students. And that's what creates learning. And so these are some of the things we're going to be talking about in that presentation, and I'm going to have more information on that later. I know not many people will see this video right now, but I'm going to keep it on this channel, and I suspect maybe someday some more people will see it. I'm going to keep it because I really like this point in my life, because in the past I complained a lot about education and it really bothered me. I was very frustrated by the system I was in. I was one of the people who felt that the current was almost always too slow. Maybe not in math class, but in English and sciences and things like that. I always felt like I was a little bit slower, or the current was a little bit slower than I wanted. And I complained a lot. But now, instead of complaining and saying this is awful, I wish someone would do something about it, maybe I'll be doing something about it. Maybe I'll be talking to some of the people who can actually make these changes, not in the public schools, but in the classrooms that will give birth to these teachers in the colleges. And I think that's very valuable. And I'm feeling as though my life is sort of turning around in a more positive direction now. And that's really nice. And so I'm going to keep this video on my channel, and maybe some people will see this. As for the actual conference, when I go, I'm going to try to take a video of that, and I'll post segments of it. It's going to be really long, and you probably won't want to watch the entire 45-minute long video, but I'll post the most interesting segments of that on here, so you can get some context and see what we talked about. That's all I've got for today. Thank you. Bye-bye.